Hello again. Today I'm going to demonstrate the Angie top. The Angie top is a classic ladies wear semi-fitted t-shirt shape. It's got three sleeve options, so you've got the long sleeve, 3/4 sleeve and the short sleeve, and it's also got an option of two different necklines, so a classic quite high crew neck and a slightly more scoop neck like the one that I'm wearing. This is another jersey project. The last two projects were jersey projects, and both of those I demonstrated on a regular sewing machine, so for a change today I'm going to demonstrate this one on the overlocker. So to start with, I've got the overlocker threaded up with 4 threads. The 2 needle threads make the seam a little bit stronger, but you can change an overlocker to just work with 3 threads, but I always like to have the 2 needle threads set up. I've tested out my stitch on a little piece which I can't find now. Here we go. So I've checked the differential feed so that I've got a nice straight seam line here. It's not wavy and it's not pulling in. And what I've also done is I've put the first needle in navy but the rest in white, because the back of this fabric's white but the face of it is navy. So if you're going to see any stitching, it would be that first needle. So I think it looks quite nice to have that in navy, but because the back's white, I think it looks a bit neater to have the rest of the thread in white. So that's all set up, ready to go. I'm using a cotton elastane art gallery knit, which is really nice quality, really nice soft fabric, so it's going to be really comfortable to wear and pretty easy to sew as well. It's a light to medium weight, this is, which works perfectly well for this sort of t-shirt shape. So let's get started. So the first thing we need to do is put the shoulders together. So I'm going to put right sides together. Let's get that sorted out and match up the shoulders. The shoulders are very small, so I'm not really going to need to pin that, but I'm just stitching. There we go. Get the raw edges nicely matched up and stitching from one end to the other. There's the back. Can you see that okay? So let me stitch that to start with. And the other thing about this is we're on a 1 centimetre seam allowance, so the actual width of the stitch is around about 0.7, so I'm only going to take off a tiny little bit, about 2 or 3 mil, to get my sizing right. And there you go, that's literally all I've taken off. Can you see that? There we go. So I'm going to do exactly the same on the other shoulder. This is another super speedy make, by the way, so we should have this finished easily within an hour. So there we go, our shoulders matched up, stitched. So the next thing is probably the hardest part of this garment, is the neckband. If you watched the Lynn Theodore and Dean sweatshirt sew along that I did, you'll already have seen how to do this. This is exactly the same, but the neckband's just a little bit thinner, and because it's a cotton elastane thinner fabric, it's curling a little bit, so it's probably a little bit more tricky to deal with, but not too bad. So the first thing we need to do is just join this short end here. So I'll go ahead and do that. The other thing about this neckband is I have got a tutorial on my YouTube channel that just shows only how to put the neckband on, so if you don't want to see how the whole garment's made, you could just watch that. So the first thing we need to do now is mark the quarters on the neckband. So I'm folding it from the stitched seam folding it in half, and I'm going to mark the halfway mark. So I like to use little nicks, but you need to make sure the nicks are very small, otherwise they start coming into your seam line. So let's have a look at that. The reason I like doing nicks, can you see that, is you can see them on both sides of the fabric, but you could use chalk or a pin or any other method that you like to use. So now I've got that halfway mark marked. Let's bring that to the seam so that we can make our quarters. And it's important as well to mark on both edges, so this top edge and the bottom edge. So we'll do that to get the quarter marks. Another little nick. And normally I'd be doing this sort of laying it flat on the table because it's a little bit easier to get it accurate. But obviously for the purpose of a video I need to be showing the camera. There we go, we've got the quarters marked on the neckband, and now we're going to do the neck edge. So starting from one seam, and I quite like to put a mark on this. These wonder clips are really good. So just mark the seam you start at so you don't forget where you've started, and pull the neck edge in half. And this one is definitely much easier to work if you're doing it sort of flat on the table. But you want to sort of gently pull, ooh, I keep going the other way, gently pull that into half. Make sure this is as matched as you can get, and mark this halfway mark from that clip. I'm just going to do that. And now bring that mark to your clip to get your quarters. So I quite often say in this, forget about your other seams, just try and think of this as a whole circle. So bringing that seam to that mark, and now I'm going to mark the quarter here. That's where you've got your other neckline, neck seam, shoulder seam even. And the final quarter. Let's give this a little bit of a trim. Get those threads off. So now we need to fold this neckband in half, so you've got your raw edges matching, and starting with your seam, match this to the seam where you started, that we put like a little clip here. So right sides together, so we've got the clip there and the seams matched, and basically we need to do that all the way around now, so matching, getting all the three marks together, so both sides of the neckband and the mark on the neck. And what you'll find is the neckband's a lot smaller than the neck edge, and that's how it should be. Let me quickly go around that and then I can show you what it looks like. There we go, you can see there the amount of ease, because what we're going to do now is we're going to pull this as we stitch it, and that will be what makes it sit nice and flat. But it's really important to get all three notches so that your neckband is nicely straight. Like I said, it's a little bit more fiddly with this because A, the neckband's narrower, and B, it's quite curly. But there we go, we can see. You can see how much slack there is there. So when we sew it, we've got to pull all those three raw edges together and stitch at the same time. So the other thing, that if you're new to this, I quite often recommend just hand tacking this so that you can pull it and tack it and then overlock it, so you haven't got to manage all of the different processes all at once. It just makes for a more, higher rate of chance of getting it looking really nice first go, because you don't really want to have to unpick this. But for now I'm just going to carry on and sew it straight on. So I'm going to start at the back neck, just away from the seam, but leading up to the seam, because I find it a little bit easier. But making sure those seams are matched up. So starting on, you can just I tend to just sort of grade it on. I'll show you when we come off. I kind of sew over the same seam and then stitch off, so that you kind of got a nice smooth edge and no angles. But let's get this neckband on to start with. Once you've done a few stitches, this is where I want to start pulling now. So I'm going to hold at the first point, and probably put glasses on would be a good idea. There we go. So I'm just going to take my time a little bit, because I need to make sure the edges are uncurled. But I'm just taking that tiny little 2 or 3 mil off, and I'm keeping it stretched so that the first point is in the right place. And when I'm close to that mark, I'm going to take this clip off, make sure those 3 notches are still matched up, and then stretch to the next point. And this one's the slightly scooped neck, and I'm doing a 3/4 sleeve in this fabric. Would be quite nice for summer. It's definitely not a process that can be rushed, this, unfortunately. But once you've got this on, it really is a pretty straightforward garment. So the seam should be pushed towards the back of the garment. And the last quarter now, I think. There we go. This is probably where it's all going to go horribly wrong, isn't it? So this is the end bit. I'm going to show you what I've done. I'm almost sewing over where I've started and just grading it off to nothing. So there. So the seam line remains nice and smooth all the way around. Then you've got this bit here. I tend to just cut that off because it's fairly well secured. You've stitched over a little bit there, but what you can also do is just pull that and thread a sort of wide-eyed needle and push that back through the seam if you like. But let's have a look at how that neckband's gone. I think we're okay. Right around. That looks pretty good. So little press and that will neaten that up really nicely now. So the next thing to do is to put the sleeves in. So we've got the sleeves here. The sleeves on this pattern are the same back and front, so we've got the notch marked at the head of the sleeve, and that matches to the shoulder seam. So right sides together again. Just matching that up, just checking the seams go in the right direction. There we go. So now, because this is much easier than trying to put the sleeve in as on the circle. So we're doing it flat, but you have got two quite extreme shapes with this pattern, but it will actually work out once you start clipping it together. So start at the head of the sleeve, matching that to your shoulder seam, and then just start to clip round to the underarm seam, and you'll find it fits together fairly easily actually. It looks like it's going to be tricky, but it won't be too bad. But if you always start at the centre, any discrepancy will come off evenly either side, so it probably won't be so bad. But hopefully you've got no discrepancies, and it's just going to match up really nicely. So there's one half clipped in. See that? So I'm going to go ahead and do that on both sleeves, all sides, and then stitch it. And I'm actually quite well practiced at doing this, because I actually did a whole video for this yesterday. Got to the end of the video and found I hadn't switched the mic on. So, a bit of a harsh learning curve, but quite good for multiple new tops in my wardrobe. So that's that one in. There we are. Everything looks a different way up. See that? So I'm going to do that on the other side and just sew those both in, and then we've got a kind of top shape coming together quite nicely. So with stitching this, I probably go for having the sleeve on top and the armhole underneath. But I do think, again, I think this is one of those personal preference things. I think you've got to try both ways and see which works best for you. Because I've done that in classes before. I've said, you know, the way that it should be done, or the way I find easier, and then somebody can find the opposite way much easier and more successful. Because really, at the end of the day, if it's going in and it's looking good, then that's what it's all about, isn't it? So, but I think the correct way would really be putting the sleeve on top. It's perhaps easier to manage that kind of shape on top, but like I said, I think try both ways and see which you find the easiest. So I haven't actually clipped this last part in. There we go, so one's in. The other one in. And that's another thing about the clips is, you know, if you pinned it on the other side and you want to switch round, it doesn't really matter. thing I'm doing here is as you know, if you're using an overlocker, you probably already know that it just sort of carries on knitting out the stitching line, and then you can just cut it off, or you can swing it round and just cut it with the knife, which is what I'm doing, just to let you know that little tip. So there we go, we've got a top with sleeves and a neckline, and now all we need to do is stitch from one sleeve edge all the way down, joining this underarm seam at that point and just carrying on to the hem. But before I do that, I quite like, there's a number of different ways you can hem jersey, and what I'm planning to do on this one is just turn a single hem and do a zigzag stitch in matching thread colour on the regular sewing machine. But I quite like, you don't have to finish this edge, it's not going to fray, but I quite like just to overlock that so it's nice and neat on the inside. I do like my insides to be nice and neat. So while it's open like this, I'm just going to overlock across the bottom of the sleeve edges. The other thing about doing that is that it just stops it curling up a little bit as well. So and it's also much easier, like I said, it's much easier to do it while it's open and not into a circle. So I'm going to just do the other one, and then so now we can do that underarm seam. So we're starting here from the cuff edge, from the sleeve edge. I'm going to clip these two together. Seam wants to be pointing into the sleeve on the armhole, or the sleeve seam. You can put a few clips in to hold this, or you can just go for it. Carry on going all the way down, just matching up your hem. There we go. So I'm just going to stitch that now. See that? And then we'll do exactly the same on the other side. So when I first decided to do this t-shirt shape, it was kind of like a really useful wardrobe staple, something that you could maybe wear under like the Emily dress that I've recently brought out, which is a pinafore style dress, but it's a semi-fitted, so it's not really clingy. But if you did want to, what I quite often say to people, if you wanted to make it, you know, wanted a tighter fit for wearing under pinafore dresses, it's just sized down. That's what I've done, because I prefer to wear them semi-fitted if I'm just wearing them without a dress over the top. I do quite like them a little bit more fitted if I'm wearing them like under an Emily dress. So you've got the two options really. But it's quite nice as well to have a simple top if you want to coordinate with another type of dress or skirt or trousers. So now I'm going to do the other side. So on this side I'm just going to match up the underarm seam and go for it. then literally all we've got left to do is the hems, and we have a top just like that. So there is a method of hemming using the overlocker, which I've got a tutorial, a standalone tutorial, which is also quite nice. I tend to do it on, if it's a sort of medium weight fabric, I tend to do a slightly deeper hem. It works really great on lighter weight fabrics. But for this one I've decided I'm just going to do a regular hem on the sewing machine. But before I go onto the sewing machine, I'm just going to do what I did on the sleeve edges and just overlock around the hem so that it's a little bit easier to turn up and matches the other sleeve hems that I've done. I'll show you the one I made yesterday. Rather silly. There we go, just stitched around that. So that's all ready. So what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to switch the camera off actually and just go and press this. I'm just going to do a single turn 2.5 centimetre hem and just clip that all the way round, and then I'm going to zigzag it. But I just wanted to quickly show you this one that I did yesterday without a microphone, rather silly. What I decided to do on this, because it's kind of this funky sea starfish print, I just thought this zigzag effect would look quite nice around the neck. So I used the blue colour from the print and did a zigzag stitch around underneath the neckband to make a bit of a feature of that, and then I did exactly the same on the cuff and on the hem edges. It just needs a little bit of a press now. So that's quite a nice, you know, just a nice alternative thing to do. But for this I'm going to keep it really simple. I'm just going to stitch with matching thread, but I'm going to come back in a second when I've pressed that and switched the machines round, so to show you that. Okay. So what I've done is I've just pressed the hem up, like I said, 2.5 centimetres and clipped it all the way around the edge. So I can stitch now. I'm going to stitch on the inside and use another guide on the sewing machine, so I've got a nice even line on the outside, and I've done exactly the same on the cuffs or the sleeve edges. I've only put one clip in. So that's ready to stitch as well. And while I was at the iron, I just gave the neckline a little press so you can see that. Looks nice and flat now. Much better. So I'm just going to go ahead and stitch this on, like I said, on the inside. Just going to start near the side seam and carry on all the way around the edges. And there you have a completely finished top. Like I said, if you use a guideline on the sewing machine, you'll get a nice even line on the outside. So even if your pressing hasn't been exactly accurate, your line on the outside will be nice. So I'm using a 2.5 stitch length and a 3.5 stitch width on a regular zigzag for this. What you could also do is put a twin needle into the machine. That gives a really nice professional finish. The only difference with that is that you need to work on the outside of the garment. And just as if you were sewing this garment with a sewing machine, you would need a stretch needle or a ballpoint needle, which is what I've got in to finish these hems off. Another tip, if you're finding you're getting missed stitches even with your correct needle in place, I've got threads going on all over the place here, have a look at the type of thread that you're using, because quite often poor quality threads just don't stitch nicely on jersey fabrics for some reason. So I use the Metler thread or the Moon thread. They're both quite nice brands. Just going to do a little bit of backward stitching, but what I'm going to do afterwards is pull these threads through to the back and just stitch them in there. See that? So we're going to do the same on the cuff edges now, get rid of that bit of overlocking. I'm going to stitch this on the inside, starting at the seam again, and just following the same guidelines so that the hems match up. While you're sewing the hem, just make sure you're not pulling it, just guide it through but don't actually pull it, because otherwise you'll start to get a wavy seam. But if it does look slightly wavy, which it might do, just giving it a bit of a press, as long as it's not extreme, all of that's going to come out when it's pressed. So final cuff and we have a top. go. Looks nice and neat. Finished top. So like I said, I'm just going to pull those threads through and just finish them off by hand. But there we have it. Completely finished top in approximately probably less than 1 hour, wasn't it? Super quick. So I hope you enjoyed that, and see you again soon.